For a game like Super Smash Bros. To pose as one of the industry's biggest fighting games, there's a lot to talk about when it comes down to the competitive elements of each installment. With each iteration of Smash comes a varying level of casual and competitive traits. If you're an outsider to the competitive scene, you might interpret that all these games function in a similar way. But if you've played any of these titles at a competitive level, you'd understand just how diverse each game can be, with both its fundamental mechanics, as well as the community behind it that pushes the game's meta. Nintendo has successfully created a product that caters to both of these diverse audiences. Whether Smash Bros. Is more essentially focused on being a constant pick for your Friday night function, or recognized for its appearance on some of esports' biggest stages, like Genesis, Nintendo has developed a very intricate Smash Bros. Entry with this installment. So with how successful the game has been, what problems does it still face going into the game's 7th year since release? From my perspective, I believe that one of Smash Ultimate's most prominent issues in the competitive scene stems from elements of certain characters and their mechanics in conjunction with various playstyles affecting overall tournament viewership. So, before we get more into that, it's important to mention that I'm not against any specific competitive playstyles or strategies I mentioned in this video. For as long as I've been involved in the Smash community, I've made it a priority to learn and understand the behaviors of all different players and their playstyles. So my goal is to help curious viewers and competitors alike understand it themselves. So, if you enjoyed this discussion video like this, be sure to like this video and subscribe if you're new. In an interview with Masahiro Sakurai with the Washington Post, Sakurai explains that he doesn't have a central focus on the competitive audience of Smash Bros, as he believes that the game would be too technically focused, inevitably pushing away casual players, which is a valid standpoint. Every Smash title has been developed to be a casual experience first, while other competitive elements are still developed under the hood, excluding unintended technical elements that were discovered over the years like wave dashing or L canceling in Smash Melee. But something as basic as playstyles, and how they differ, have been an integral part of every Smash game. In an interview with Sakurai that dives into the process of developing a Smash character, Sakurai mentions 4 separate points of focus when considering a new addition to Smash: proper portrayal of each character's personality, one trait that only that character can do, compliance with game balance, and proper distribution among the franchises. Except if you're Fire Emblem for some reason. Sakurai also made it a point to mention that just because the character fits the criteria, it doesn't imply that they're fit to be a new entry in the game, further emphasizing his main focus that in order to be a Smash character, the character not only has to be practical, but they have to be fun.
Yeah, sure. Everybody loves you. People always love the stupid one.
The focus on how original the interaction between character number 1 would be in comparison to character number 2 when engaging in a fight is what makes Smash Bros. As unique as it is, and has always been Nintendo's main point of focus when approaching a new game in the series. With all of these elements combined, Sakurai has delivered on an authentic gameplay experience with a very particular game design and a unique cast of characters, and it has since cultivated very organic experiences for both its player bases. But that doesn't imply that all of those experiences are necessarily positive either. While some could argue that certain character design choices are a bit more irrational or out of place than others, it's usually due to prioritization of how enjoyable characters are to play, in comparison to how they directly influence the competitive aspect of the game. Steve being able to place blocks on stages, or Sonic having unmatched speed in comparison to other characters being very basic examples. But these intricacies tend to go much further than what is surface level, which in all honesty is much healthier for the game itself in a broad sense in comparison to what the player base views as problematic. Because fun in Smash Bros. Is objective. There are plenty of different ways to have fun with this game. From its game modes, wide variety of content, to competing in competitive tournaments, the game's enjoyment isn't defined by what is deemed enjoyable by its spectators, but rather by the players that actively play the game. But in previous years, both the casual and competitive sides of the Smash community have voiced their opinions of things they dislike about viewing the game as a spectator, one of which is most relevant to this topic, being the pacing of in-game matches in a tournament setting. More specifically, between the game's current meta characters. So why is that? What creates such a strong dislike for the game at certain points, while the game itself still sees so much long-term success? In order for us to understand that better, it's good to recognize what both casual and competitive players want from Smash as a form of entertainment, and why both of these factors conflict so often. If spectators can anticipate a matchup between two fast-paced and naturally aggressive players or characters, it's usually met with overwhelmingly positive reception. But that doesn't always apply to a tournament set with characters who are optimized harmonize with a more naturally passive playstyle, in combination with certain elements from their characters that further embrace that gameplay strategy. This doesn't imply that these strategies enforced by these players are inherently bad, but they're certainly quick to be written off in the eyes of the community that refuses to question why these gameplay strategies are implemented to begin with. Characters that lead the meta across the Smash Bros. Series are ones that can take advantage of their lead in stocks and percentage and maintain it by forcing risky interactions from their opponents, by either dealing high percentages from a long, less pressured distance, or even through large bouts of damage through high-risk, high-reward options that their character supplies them with. Needless to say, the passive nature of some competitive players isn't what is directly causing these negative experiences for viewers of the game, but rather the combination of both playstyle and in-game characteristics that can result in a frustrating viewing experience for both sides of the Smash community. This particular issue leads plenty of audience members of the Smash community to just simply not be as interested to watch certain matches with specific characters, or even just Smash Ultimate in general, while others who have stayed the course to understand why these elements prove to be so frustrating seemingly learn a whole new side of the game just by watching how interactions in the game are made. So, what can we do? What can the collective Smash Ultimate community do to cultivate a more enjoyable viewing experience? Over previous years, the community has gone through multiple discussions of permanently banning certain characters, most prominently being Steve. But this not only hurts the player base that the game currently has, but it also goes against legitimate tournament guidelines enforced by Nintendo. From my own observations, I've noticed that the community yearns for some type of change in competitive rule sets to allow for more flexibility, and yet nothing changes. Things are stagnant, and we've got to find solutions that actually enforce the change we want to see from an entertainment standpoint at the competitive level. Some events, both online and offline, are finally starting to implement these experimental rule sets, such as the newfound Cashbox tournament series hosted by Hungrybox, where every other Smash Ultimate tournament that is hosted will feature hand-selected stages, as well as temporarily ban 4 characters also chosen by the tournament's patrons. Though implementing these experimental components of the game could always warrant the discussion of how reputable the competitive nature of the tournament can be, I'd like to believe that the game can't afford to stay in the position that it's currently in. The competitive Smash Ultimate community hasn't done enough to explore the rest of the content that the game has to offer to potentially answer some of the community's most pressing issues. So, if you're in any position to participate in tournament organization, or know someone who is, it's important to have this discussion if you agree with the points I've made in this video today. Some have already concluded that there's no one specific answer to enhancing the viewing experience of the game without compromising in certain areas. But if we continue to follow the arbitrary guidelines established in a timeline where the meta for the game was not as nearly as developed, I fear that there's a layer of enjoyment with Smash Ultimate that we might not ever see from both sides of the collective community. Stagnation is what I believe to be the utmost concern for the competitive Smash scene, and I would love nothing more than to contribute pushing the envelope for the game's meta by starting this discussion to increase the game's awareness in esports, as well as bring new life into the franchise while we anticipate whatever is to come of the series in the next installment. So, if we're on the same page, like and share this video, and if not, leave a comment on why not. But as always, thanks for watching.